You start round 4 then, please.
Okay. This is a shorter poem. Penelope and Company. Although, as I like to say, Penelope, because I never heard it pronounced until I knew about it from books, but I never heard it pronounced until I was my brain. Penelope and Company. Here at our looms, working the cyan, the sapphire, see how tranquil we are, weaving the bleu de lion, and setting by the jonquil. Our skies this fall, how translucent, an azure that no fire has touched, nor ink nor violet, in this 5th year of war. The days shuttle from dawn to dusk and back again, calm now, with no flush of damson or damask, no cast of rose or yellow. The news from Troy of lords and sons now quivers in the air. We wives will weave red dahlia in our looms. Look, even now a ship arrives.
Well, I love the mystery in this. And by the way, the ending reminds me quite a lot of the end of Dylan's All Along the Watchtower. 2 riders were approaching, the wind began to howl. Those are the last 2 lines of the song. You know, all along the watchtower, princes kept a view.
I don't know.
Well, all along the last verse is all along the watchtower, princes kept a view, while all the women came and went, barefoot servants too. Outside in the cold distance, the wind began to howl. I'm sorry. Outside of the cold distance, a wildcat did growl. 2 riders were approaching. The wind began to howl. So you've got this image of the approaching riders, but you don't know what news they're bearing or why they're approaching. And it was just a brilliant way to end. And for me, when I read this, the connection to the war, it's fascinating to me, the details that you use, because it's the 5th year of the war. So Penelope is only a quarter of the way through the wait that she's going to have to endure before Odysseus returns. It's 20 years before he returns. So this is still a young, you know, Penelope, who is not as developed as much guile as she has developed after 20 years of dealing with the suitors, etc. And of course, the 5th year of the war is only halfway through the war. So it's got another 5 years to run. So I thought it was very interesting that you placed it right at in the midpoint of that war. And then having the ship arrive, the news from that ship could not be about anything but the continuation of the war, because it was going to continue for many years afterward. And so what that did for me was to create this kind of stasis that she's in, that she's not at the beginning when he's left. She's not at the end of the war when she thinks he's going to return. She's not 10 years after that when he finally does return. She's kind of in a place where not only is not much happening, but not much is going to happen. And yet, it's this patient, endless activity of the looms. And then all the details we get are about this profusion of colors and flowers. To me, this is deeply mysterious, which is what I love about it. So I can't make sense of it, but I don't care.
Isn't it, Zara, isn't the movement of the colors here significant? That that in the first three stanzas, these colors are muted, and and she's not even willing to put the yellow of a jonquil into what she's weaving. It's all this muted azure and so forth. And then at the end, there's this profusion of red, right? Of um, which I don't know, which for me carries the the idea of this life coming back to her with Odysseus, and the sort of blood red um, feeling of passion returned and so forth. Um, but then, of course, the reader understands, as Al says, that she's on the verge of disappointment. The ship is going to pull up to the pier, and Odysseus isn't going to be on it, and she'll have to face another um, even longer stretch of time before they're reunited. So it struck me the sadness of that situation just struck me, and the fact that she's on the verge of having her wish come true, only to find out momentarily that she's got even a longer wait ahead.
Shall I say something about this poem?
If you want to.
Well, I, I, I think it's wonderful that you find all this material in it, but I do have to tell you that, as you could tell from my first The Shadow poem, I am my poems come not so much from such calculating narratives as they do from sound, from the
Hmm.
sound of the words. So this began as a poem I was in I had left my family home. I was living in an apartment in Berkeley, which is on the bay, facing the bay. But it was morning, it was dawn, and all this light was flooding into the window. There I am, a sort of
Hmm.
the master of my house for the first time in my life. I could, and it was all about the colors. So this was a poem about just the colors for about 5 years, and I kept reworking. I could not find a way to make it really beautiful. I kept reweaving. I would take it apart, just like, and of course, then there was that image of undoing the weaving and then redoing it. And that was what was happening in this poem. And so Penelope came into it that way. And and it was just in terms of the sounds that it comes.
Hmm.
And there was this sense for me of day coming in with with the different hues of blue, and then the light, and then I suppose the red. I don't know. But I probably needed a one syllable in front of the dahlia. So um, the colors coming in, and this is a process that happens every morning. The dawn comes in through the window where I'm sleeping, and so it's like the loom, isn't it? You undo it, you sleep, and then the process happens again the next day. And
And you have to knit it again.
fact that the lords and sons are coming or not is, well, maybe today I'll win the lottery, or maybe, maybe I'll have a poem accepted, or I'll read a good book. I mean, but meanwhile, this whole process keeps happening. So that's Penelope and company. It's sort of um that was what it was. But I was pleased. It was a breakthrough in terms of my writing, to be able to move this to move this loom to do something, to make the poem do something different, something more and engaged with history. I had no idea, I think, about the 10-year war. I wasn't really fifth year. It was just it just sounded, fifth sounded good. I wanted the fifth year. I wasn't really calculating the narrative and that level.
Well, a couple of things about that, though. First of all, when we're making what we think are conscious decisions,
Yes, right.
they're not always only, I mean, they're not ever only conscious decisions. So there's also another subterranean dimension that makes you make the choices without your being aware of it. So there's that whole subterranean dynamic that's going on whenever we write anything at all. So there's that. And then the other thing is, once you put the thing down on the page, particularly when you tie it in to the characters that we know from the Odyssey, it really underlines the truth that when the work leaves your hands and goes to the reader, she or he takes on a kind of ownership that turns it into something else, and certainly something more. And so it must have been interesting for you to hear where we took this, but there was no way I could not respond to this poem by looking at fifth year of the war, and because that means something to me, and the ship arriving, means something to me, and the colors. It's interesting to me that when David read the Red Dahlia at the end, he sees it as passion. I saw it as an expression of the bloodshed that she knows is taking place completely in another part of the world that she can't see, but that she's making visible without realizing why. And, that's, I don't know, it's not an impossible reading.
No, I'm delighted. I have to tell you, I'm delighted with I mean, I don't know, I'm flattered. I'm
Well,
glad
good.
it worked for you. But I was just describing my process.
Yeah. Well, again, what we're aware of when we're working is only part of what we're doing.
And what motivates us or what drives us is always interesting. But
Yeah.
anyway, the colors may be like David's water, this the sort of motion of the water is sort of pushing the poem forward too.
Yeah. No, I mean, look at what we got out of this.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, again, it really just underlines that once you let a poem go, or in my case, a song go, and it's really true with songs that, people get attached to songs, and then the song means something to them that the writer couldn't ever possibly have thought about. But it's so real to those people. They own it in a way, and you can't take that away from them. That's their right. So that's kind of what you're licensing every reader to do, is to misunderstand you in her or his own way. And you just got to say, okay. So
That's true in one's life.
Yeah, this strikes me as a very clear example of the statement you made at the outset this evening about how sound form is the engine of your work. And here, the reader who's grasping after literal meaning or something, the way Al and I were, can easily add a layer of interpretation to the poem that you might not have intended, but it's all the richer for being there.
yeah, I mean, it's on some level, it's imminent in the poem.
Mm-hmm.
It's imminent as part of the transaction between writer and reader that neither side needs to be aware of before the encounter. So, yeah, I mean, I have other poems where I talk about how I think that the purpose of humanity, because we're the only creatures that have a concept of meaning, that we're kind of the universe's way of ascending to a level where part of the universe brings meaning into play, and that makes us very important. That we have to be careful, because our imaginations and our abilities to see meaning everywhere can lead us astray, just as it can lead us to great insights. So, but that's another poem that I'm not reading. So David, let's go to you.
All right.
For number 4.
Like Zara here, I have a shorter poem for number 4. This is entitled Insomnia.
Yes.
This is just my railing against the fact that at this period of my life I can't sleep. So a little bit of a insomnia. Years of windstorms have prized loose the once stout windows hung to shield. They rattle through the night, dissonant tattoos at uneven intervals, eschewing a steady, dusky rhythm that might lead down to sleep. What binds me so buffeted to the tossing crest? What mistaken waking persists apart from dark release?
Well carped.
Yeah.
I will tell you that my way of looking at this poem, characteristic of my being a musician, is to focus on the insight that you had about rhythm, which is that it is the uneven rhythms that keep you from sleep.
Absolutely.
That the even rhythms can't, and this is the power of lullaby, isn't it? It's rhythm and melody leading us down in a regular, in a regular way.
I think you need
So
to get your windows fixed, though.
he has other poems about his windows, about windows that rattle and become loose over time. What's that great one? Talk about metaphor. What is it? Locked? Is it locked and closed? Which is the one about the door that won't hang right over time?
Yeah, I have a poem about that. The lock, the bolt not fitting properly in the hasp, and so the door won't lock, or when it gets locked, it's difficult to open. Yeah. Yeah, home repair, as Al knows, is one of my abiding themes. If he would have put home repair on the list of possible themes, I would have snatched that up.
Well, I would have if I had 5 poems of my own about home repair, but you know my home. I don't.
But on the other hand, the great thing about I wanted to compliment you on the list, Al, because it seemed to me that Inner Light, just we could have fit any poems in under the title Inner Light, and I was so grateful for that.
Well, I try to make open-ended ones if possible, but it wasn't Inner Light, it was Inner Life.
Inner Life, I'm sorry. That's
Okay,
an
but you
interesting
did choose.
mistake.
Yeah, you did choose life-related poems, but yeah, of course. There, I'm limited more by what poems I have left that I haven't used in these shows. It's hard for me to find 5 poems. I have to come up with a theme from the ones that I have left. And I mean, I'm in the middle of year 3, so I've probably used between 100 and 150 poems so far. It's a great drain on my output. Anyway, so I guess that puts me on the spot. And this is one that, Zara, you may have heard me read at an open mic at a powwow event.
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
Yeah, at season's end.
Yes.
Yes, I do remember this one.
Okay. Well, then I apologize for making you hear it again.
Oh,
But David has read it, but he has not heard me read it. So this is At Season's End. As I do every night, I read in bed. The book rests on my chest and takes me to the late Tang Dynasty, a favorite. I turn the pages, riffling the silence. Tonight I view that world through a poet's eyes, old, his spirit dimmed by years of exile in the northern provinces. He sits in gathering fall and darkness by a rock, meant to shelter him from changing winds. But there's no trace of wind, and not a ripple disturbs the surface of the nearby marsh. He weeps for his long lost and distant home with downcast eyes, while far above him, all unnoticed, cranes are catching warmer air to aid them in their journey to the south. They slip and glide beyond, beating the season. I turn the page and am surprised to find a bookmark fallen out of sight for years. On it, the name and number of a girl who'd given me a lover's compliment. To my deep shame, the words she said are all, or nearly all, that I remember of her. That, and how far back the memory was made in what feels like another life. I use my fingertips to wipe my eyes and clarify the ending of the poem. When I take up the book again, the pages, at the moisture of my touch, puff up.
Oh,
You find that amusing? Is that another one of your chuckles of
this should be a song, no? Shouldn't it be a song? It has a song like arc.
too many words
Too many words.
for my songs?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're very skilled at creating a narrative that's quite detailed and is very I don't know, realistic, that really cleaves to the real world. It just creates it's it's quite a skill to do this. I think you've mastered it completely.
Well, thank you. I mean, I I won my spurs writing a couple of novels when I was young. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of experience with long narratives that doesn't come into play all that often in my poetic guise, although I do have some very, very, very long poems, narrative poems. But most of them are short enough to read at a powwow event, as I was able to read this one. And yeah, and I do revere, without claiming to understand Chinese poetry, I really do revere the statements made by Du Fu and Li Bo, and I mean, there isn't a specific poem that is described here, because there are dozens of poems that are like that from that dynasty. It's always the poet has been exiled to a far province, and he hasn't seen home, and he's out in a landscape that's not, that's difficult for him, that he's not really a part of. And there's a very specific quality of the emotion of isolation and loneliness, and there's a poignancy in those poems that I really, really prize. So part of what was going on here was my attempt to kind of grab at a little bit of that somehow. And then, as I usually do, I do a pullback from, if it were a camera shot, it's a close up with this poet in the 9th century. And then I pull back to my own life and make a connection. I much prefer doing that than just telling the story that's in the close up. I always like to contextualize it, because then you can create a tension between the meaning of the close up and the meaning of the pullback. But you know this one, David, do you not?
I do. I remembered it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it reads maybe better out loud than it does on the page, but I'm not sure. But it's very good to read out loud. It feels good to read it.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
I remember years and years ago, I read an essay by John Updike about what it meant to be a writer. And he said, what the general public doesn't appreciate is that once a writer begins to see him or herself as a writer, his whole relationship to his experience changes,
Yeah,
because what he is doing is acknowledging that nothing in his life quite gives him the pleasure of his own writing. And so he's constantly mining his experience for that which will give him that pleasure.
Yes.
And so when Zara says you have this skill approach to narrative, which you've refined over the years, that really rings true to me. I mean, consciously or not, Al, I really do feel like it's inevitable that a person with your gifts is constantly looking to turn them into art. And there's absolutely, well, that's a blessing. And um, so yeah,
And
that's all I would say about that.
yes, they do not understand. I think people who are not writers don't understand the satisfaction that of that. So they think that, well, in my case, it's, well, I don't know. It's just, it leads to some misunderstandings. But
yeah.
I want
Well,
to add that one of I think one of the great poems of the 20th century, really the early 20th century, is is the one that Ezra Pound translates about the young
the rip,
girl.
the
Yeah.
river merchant's
River
wife, a
Merchant's
letter.
Wife, a Letter.
We all know it.
I love that poem.
Me
What
too.
what is it about that poem? It is such a wonderful poem. I just, every time I read it, which is every year
Well,
or so.
again, it's the emotional state that's achieved in that poem is so specific, and it's so poignant, and it's simultaneously foreign and completely familiar.
Yes. Yes. It
But
just,
again, to reference what you said earlier, the cadence of that poem is perfect. I don't care how close to a literal translation that is. The
Yeah,
cadence of that poem is perfect. And the hope and the sadness that are contained in that poem is, by my standards, perfectly achieved.
yes.
You know,
yeah,
I I just think, yeah, I agree. That's a wonderful one of them.
Yeah. It is
yeah. And I wish, not hard enough to go learn Chinese, but I wish that I had a better sense of of what the experience is for a reader of the original, particularly because the way that Pound came to his translations, with Fenellosa's help,
Yeah.
pretty much ensures that there's a healthy dose of him in
Indeed.
anything that he gives someone else's name to.
Indeed. And I had Yi Chao do her translation of that poem. This
Really,
was a
Yi Chao
woman
is yeah. Go ahead.
that was a
Tell,
student of ours. And what she came up with had nothing to do with the poem that I was
really,
familiar.
really.
So yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't forgive Pound for making broadcasts in World War II, encouraging American soldiers to give up. But that's a hell of a poem.
And
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
and he is a remarkable poet, and he shouldn't be forgotten for that. And when you think of, and when you read the piece on Cantos, your heart is moved by him. The way he was imprisoned in Italy was
yeah.
quite cruel, and what happened to him in 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 the insane asylum. I mean, really. Yes, I know he went astray, but he went astray in the way that one who's caught up in the moment and what there's some fever. I really have a sense he didn't know what he was doing. I mean, he was a poet, but I'm not. I know. I know. I'm not. I'm not exonerating him. I'm just showing him some worse.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you on all of that.
well, so where are we? Did
Last
I just ended round 4, so we're heading into the
final.
back stretch here.
And
So
it's a good.
take it away.
Okay. I'll try not to talk so much, but that was a.
No, it's fine. Talk all you like. I like to hear you talk.
Don't say that.
I didn't say you did. I said I did.
This is a guzzle called Love. If he's heart sore, don't put the blame on love. It was her fate to make a game of love. Just so you know, we've got your secret files. Time to name names, the actual name of love. Some holy folks devote their lives to it, keeping lit the sacred flame of love. Your jealous fury borders on taboo. You sometimes feel the shame of love. Should you hole up alone at home? Oh no. You'd feel it like a missing limb, the pain of love. He fell for them, one followed by the next. A to Z, each brief and splendid reign of love.
Well, when you said that you thought that my poem could be a song,
Yeah.
the guzzle form, which asks you to end each couplet in the same way, but with a variation. Reading this poem of yours put me immediately in mind of Cole Porter's lyric to Love for Sale, which, if you ever listen to Love for Sale, it does the same thing. What is it? Something, the thrill of love. I've been through the mill of love, old love, new love, any love but true love, love for sale. And so, the repetitive nature of this and the ringing back to the phrase of this element of love, that element of love, it just made me think of Cole Porter. So I would submit to you that this is what ought to be a song.
Right.
So it's guzzle is another form that I have not written. I don't. Is that something you ever played around with, Dave?
No, no. But I have to say, this poem is witty in a really wonderful way, Sarah, at least to this reader.
Yeah.
And again, you know, for this reader, the form is a perfect enhancement, or maybe it's the other way around, to the wit of the poem. Maybe the wit of the poem enhances the form or whatever. But yeah, it's as a choice of form for this content. This seems, I can't imagine it being better.
Oh, thank you so much. This poem really does take. Uh, I said to my daughter recently, it takes decades really to cut. A poem can come from actually decades and a whole life of experience,
Mhm.
and is one of those that comes from each one of these couplets. Really, is. I mean, it's from experience that is long and deep. Anyway, let's
Yeah.
move. I don't want to belabor and talk.
Yep.
Needs must.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. You want to go on? Yes, my last offering here is needs must needs be. At dawn, my dog is playing in the snow. The red spread across the dome of the sky slowly dissolves, and she sprints from one corner of the lot to the other, buries her head in a drift as if to cool her ears, then shakes her muzzle free of cold and sprints off again. There is for her no residue of fear or dread, set ticking by an old remembered adage, at morning, take warning. What will arise along the line of daylight hours, delight, sleep, hunger, satisfaction, absence, she will greet as fresh in its particulars, and then continue, pass on, receiving whatever is next without forethought or remorse, as needs must, as needs be.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, I mean, that's your, without your intending it to be, your comment on my poem about consciousness being the human thing.
Mm,
Because, and that the Edenic state is pre-conscious, and just as your dog is in that state.
yeah, I think
And
that's perfectly accurate.
yeah, and this is, of course, to cop my own comment in my own poem, what we all wish we could do that we
Right.
can't.
Right.
And be able to sleep.
I didn't know you were having trouble sleeping. That's not good. I'm sorry to hear that.
So,
um, you know, again, David and I have known each other for a very, very long time. And so we've kind of gone back and forth in a cordial way about writing in meter, writing in form. Um, and it's certainly been said often enough that as a meter, iambic lends itself very naturally to English expression or vice versa. And when I look at this poem, I notice that there are whole lines that are perfectly iambic pentameter lines.
Yeah.
mhm.
Throughout. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I discovered that to be true fairly frequently.
Yeah.
It is
There
a
is for
rhythm.
her no residue of fear. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah. And so there's never any really awkward phrasing or word because you do have a good ear. It just flows naturally. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Amazing.
I don't miss the fact that it's not metric, but I occasionally am bemused at how naturally you fall in and out of it without meaning to in a conscious way. So
Well, there's some anapes. I mean, there's anapes basically, or a few phrases, but
yeah, but they weren't assembled to be Anapest is all. It's all he's digested the rhythms and then they're coming out in a natural way.
he's read a lot of poetry. You're right. That's
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Mm.
true.
Yeah, where do we get the idea of a poetic voice? And I guess it's worth mentioning that for the generations of poets that follow us, they may not um,
Hmm.
they may not have that in their unconscious as a kind of a conditioning factor on what rises from their unconscious, because somehow they've been taught that it's not done.
Right. And it's amazing how strong that is, the feeling that it's not done in
Yeah,
certain circles. Yeah.
yeah. But my attitude is no, it's not done. It's continuing.
Oh, it's not finished.
Right.
Right. So, well, yeah, thank you for that. It's like that's such a great image of your dog sticking her snout in the snow to cool her ears. See, these are things that I could never imagine. I could not come up with a line like that because your experience is so different from mine, in my dogless life.
And what is this phrase needs must needs be? Where does that come from? What is the origin of that?
I can't tell you that. I can only tell you it's something my mother used to say all the time you know, when I would be complaining about some feature of the universe which couldn't be changed, and she would go, needs must, need be. It's just the way it is, kid.
Oh, interesting. Is that a Calvinist? Is there some?
I wonder.
Yeah, that's more insightful than you're probably even aware, Zara. There's a lot of Calvinists in that. Marilyn
Wow.
Robinson would be very happy about my
Yeah,
mother.
love Marilyn Robinson. I love her.
So do I. So do I.
Well,
Well, it would be interesting to find out where that did originate, though.
Mhm.
I mean, I didn't grow up with that, although somewhere along the line became aware of if need be.
it's not Italian at all. I would
No,
say
it is not. No,
it's different.
but as needs must, as needs be. I had not. I'd never heard that prior to reading this poem.
Mm.
So, although heaven knows it has the ring of authenticity, doesn't it? Your mother was not the only one saying it, I would guess.
No, I don't think so. No, in fact, Ed, you mentioned that. Um, I've heard it used in Anne's family, and this is my
Really,
partner,
Yeah,
and she uses it too, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and her background is
none of my Italian relatives spoke anything like any of this.
Oh,
But that's a story for another day. And I've written about a lot of my relatives. So, um, so yeah, to go back to what you were saying earlier, David, yeah, I scour my life for stories to tell and characters to inhabit them, and there are many.
And they come to you naturally. You're always full of them. You always have them.
Well, they're alive in me, and I want to bear witness.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave at this point. I've written about so many of my relatives and friends and things that happened to me. I don't want to leave anybody out that
Oh, right.
that made my life what it's become. Not no one of them did it all, but every one of them did something. So I kind of want to give them their due. Sometimes I wonder what I've forgotten, but I guess that's a pointless quest.
Okay, read your poem though. What's this poem that we're gonna read?
This is my last one. I guess this is another essay. It's certainly an advice poem, and you've heard others of mine. Both of you have heard others of mine along these lines, but this one kind of starts in a place that is a little unexpected. It's called Living in the Future. Sea level shifted underneath your feet. Magnetic north is drifting from the pole. You used to lean on answers that repeat. No old key now fits any new keyhole. Your problems will admit no diminution. Stumbling blocks will be put in your way. Don't fall in love with any one solution. What worked yesterday won't work today. It used to be you'd spend your life to find security in a safe place, to rest. That's out the window. Now, retrain your mind to grapple with a different daily test. Let go whatever got you through before. Change direction when you hit a wall instead of looking for a hidden door. To rest is no security at all. Slip around the obstacles you meet. Go in the way you're being made to go, even when it looks like a retreat. The right path may be not for you to know. At rest is good as dead, so let that be and move. Be water flowing to the sea.
Nice. Very nice.
But hard to do.
Good advice. Good
Easy
advice.
to say, but hard to do.
I'll tape this one to the mirror. I give myself.
So, yeah, I like to give advice.
Well done.
Well, this has been what I hoped it would be. I thank you both. You're thoughtful people, and I appreciate your thoughts. And you're feeling people, and I appreciate your feelings. So yeah, an interesting bunch of poems.
Thank you.
No yelling in any of them. Although, as you know, I have some poems where there's some yelling happening, but not this particular group.
Zara, I'm so happy that I got to be introduced to your work in this way. And I'll certainly pursue it now with with firm intention. So thanks for that. And Al, thank you. What a trooper you are to keep doing these broadcasts and bring together poets that otherwise wouldn't discover each other, So I'm so grateful for that. So thanks again.
Well, you know how welcome I want you to feel. And it's great if the guests discover in each other what I already know about them from their work, because I only pick guests whose work I know, and I kind of guess at the combinations. but yeah, it's not hard to do this particular kind of work because I get such a nice feeling doing these things and when they're done. And so to hear that the guests also had a nice feeling, this isn't really work at all, as you know. But it is a nice way to get to know a poet, isn't it?
Yeah.
To see them, hear them read the work, talk a little bit about it. I think this is something that there should be more of, which is why I'm trying to always do a little more.
Good, good, good.
Thank you, Al.
Well, all right, I'm going to say good evening, and we will we'll see where this ends up, but it's certainly going to end up in April, and then depending on how much time we've got, maybe beyond. But we'll start in April. So
Thank you.
adios. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you. See
See-
you.